Welcome back to Arise America. Russian authorities are building up security measures following a second terrorist bombing on Monday that killed 14 people on a bus in Volgograd. And on Sunday, a suicide bomber killed at least 16 people in a massive explosion at a train station, also in Volgograd. These attacks raised serious safety concerns for Russia's upcoming 2014 Olympic Games in Sochi. Bill Keyloor joins us on the phone. He is a professor of history and international relations at Boston University. Bill, thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Look, I think anybody would have concern now. We've got about 5 weeks or so or less to the Winter Games in Sochi. I've got to ask you, should we be concerned? People coming there should be concerned about their safety.
Well, you know, this insurgency in the upper Caucasus region has been going on for decades. It's nothing new. But what we're seeing now is, I think, a bid to gain publicity. These groups have not been able to gain much headway in the area there, but now that the Olympics are being held in Sochi, about 400 miles from Volgograd, this is a great opportunity for them to get on the radar screen of the world.
Well, let me ask you a question. Do you think perhaps they could be staging these attacks, unfortunately with lives lost, to basically test the mettle of the Russians to see, how secure and how tight their security actually is?
Well, I think that's the aim, but if the security really tightens up, so I think it will under Mr. Putin, then they could hit what you might call softer targets outside of the Olympic Village. So this may be just a warning that we're gonna start engaging in this kind of terrorist activity. And again, because of the Olympics, the media throughout the world are focused on that part of the world, and they're going to get a lot of free publicity in that.
Well, absolutely. There's no doubt about that. But let's talk about some of the security there. I'm sure this Olympic Village will have some sort of solidified perimeter around it. I would think that if they were going to do any attacks, they probably would not be able to penetrate that perimeter, but they might perhaps perform some attacks outside of the perimeter.
That's right. But, you never can be 100% certain. The Boston Marathon bombing, for example, penetrated a very, very significant security perimeter there. And all it takes is one person with a backpack, and that can wreak havoc. So I think that, people have to be very concerned and very cautious about going there because, as I say, it just takes one to get through.
I want to talk a little bit also about, of course, the terrorist bombing in Boston here. The Tsarnaev brothers, of course, one was killed, the other is in prison right now.
Yeah.
We don't know all the intelligence, and maybe you know obviously more than I know and some of the people here, but do you think this was part of a bigger terrorist plot?
As a reader of the Boston Globe, which did a very in-depth analysis of these two brothers, it seems to me absolutely certain that there was no connection with a terrorist plot. These two guys, particularly the older brother, were discontented and angry and frustrated with their own lives, and so they just decided to do something really spectacular. So there was no evidence whatsoever of links with Al-Qaeda or any of the other radical Islamist groups.
Let's go back to the Northern Caucasus region in Chechnya. As you mentioned, there's been tensions going on there for decades. Just walk us quickly through, Bill, a little bit of history in that area. What is the tension over?
Sure. Very quickly, Chechnya and Dagestan are the two predominantly Muslim regions in Russia. Have been revolting against the Russian Federation ever since the breakup of the Soviet Union. In the early 1990s, Boris Yeltsin, when he was president of the Russian Federation, sent a military force down there to try to crush it. And then later, when Mr. Putin took over at the turn of the 21st century, he really sent a very powerful Russian force down there, and they succeeded in crushing this insurgency, but you still have these isolated little groups that are operating, and they're the ones that probably were responsible for these two bombings in Volgograd.
And just wreaking all sorts of havoc in that region. Of course, in the last couple of weeks, we've seen this. I guess the question I would have to ask, Bill, is do you think that the Russians, especially Putin, have the mettle and the wherewithal to thwart these attacks, number one? And then number two, is this just something that might be going on forever, like a lot of terrorism is these days around the world?
Yeah, I think that if any country has the ability, any government has the ability to crush this kind of thing, it's Russia. I mean, they are absolutely ruthless in cracking down on dissent, and I think you're right that there will be a sort of low-grade, low-intensity insurgency that will continue.
Interesting.
Whether it will have any greater impact or not is hard to tell. But as far as I can see, there's no evidence that it's connected with groups, let's say in Afghanistan or Yemen or Somalia or other areas where radical Islamist groups are working. This is just a group of local people who are angry at the fact that they are Muslims in a largely Orthodox Christian country, and they're trying to gain their independence from it.
All eyes will be on Sochi in the next few weeks, 5 weeks to be exact. Bill Keylor from Boston University, thank you, and Happy New Year, sir.